We are going to have a post-screen discussion with the Newsies producers, Zach Toombs and Kate Grumke, and the Center of Public Integrity's Jenny Jo, which is going to be moderated by Christina Larson, who is our award-winning environmental journalist correspondent for the Associated Press. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kate? Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Mei Fong for that great short introduction, and congrats to you all for this tremendous effort. We don't have that much time, so I'll keep the questions short and pointed, and then open it up for a couple questions from the audience. Zach, so your team, your research, you found that in the U.S., mostly in Texas and Colorado, about 1.4 million people were living within 500 feet of these rigs that you showed, where they had higher exposure to things like benzene, which is a known carcinogen. In the film, it mentioned briefly that you brought this information to governments in Texas and Colorado, but there wasn't much response or any response. Could you tell me about your efforts to try to get a response and how, I guess, they stonewalled you? What was that like?
Yeah, I think it's an experience that many journalists are probably familiar with, and we hope that that as we do screenings and talk about the work, that we can eventually incorporate a response. That would be the ideal version of this documentary, one that includes that. But yeah, the 1.4 million number was a result of some very talented data reporters who worked on this. Rosie Chima, who is with Newsy and the EW Scripps Company, and the folks at the Center for Public Integrity, and others. And so this was based on census data, as well as records that we pulled state by state to show where these rigs were in proximity to residential areas. And those numbers shocked us. I mean, they really did. I also wanted to say, just real quick, thank you to the DC Environmental Film Festival for putting this on. Thank you so much. We haven't seen this on a big screen like this before. Kate and I actually were here last year for DC EFF and saw a film in this exact venue, and we love this venue, so this is great. I'd never seen my sweat on my forehead at that scale on the screen behind me. So that was an experience. But I wanted to also just quickly recognize the core production team on this. I want to make you stand up. So, yeah, she's rolling her eyes already. Jennifer Smart, our editor and animator, colorist. Kevin Clancy, our director of photography. Where is he? Our videographer, Kyle Pyatt. Come on. So if you loved this and you thought it was beautiful, go talk to them afterward. And if you didn't like it, you can talk to me afterward.
Okay, great. You know, in addition to sort of the core mission, I suppose, of journalism, right? I mean, trying to hold governments accountable to what's happening. You put a human face on what these effects were. Kate, can you tell me a bit about how you made contact with this family, the Larsons and the Gonzaleses in Colorado? How you got to know them to get them to talk on camera about this really tragic thing that happened to them and what you learned from them?
Yeah, so the Larsons had kind of started to speak about this at hearings, and they met Heidi Hinkle, who you saw was one of the organizers around Prop 112. So she kind of put us in touch, and we talked to them about their story, got some of those records from them, and then went to go spend some time with them in Colorado.
And were they forthcoming at first, or did you? I mean, you know, sometimes it takes a little while for people to trust a journalist. How did that go?
Yeah. So the first time we talked to them, they were really clear that they didn't want to be part. They wanted to be part of something that was journalistic. They weren't participating in like commercials for this cause or anything like that. And so it was kind of a conversation of, you know, just like we don't know if you were smoking every single day, if that's why you got lung cancer. It's the same thing with this, where you can't say exactly why somebody may have gotten cancer, so they wanted to make it clear that that's what they believed, but they wanted something that would have some nuance and have them be able to say, really the problem here is we don't know enough yet, and that's what they were kind of calling for.
Okay, Jenny, you did some terrific reporting on the politics in DC that enabled some of these changes to happen. So I think probably it's no secret to everyone in this room that the Trump administration has, made efforts to decrease regulation, decrease enforcement of existing regulation. But one thing this film brought out was what happened during the Obama administration with the lifting of the crude oil export ban. And I think that many people, myself included, when we think about Obama's legacy, we think about we think about the climate, the Paris Accord, pushing for, controls on, global efforts to control global warming. Can you talk about how this export ban, it seems confusing or counterintuitive at first. Can you sort of unpack that?
Yes, and I think that dichotomy is actually what makes it really interesting. The Trump administration has really played up this whole energy dominance agenda, which is something that Trump just talked about at the State of the Union address. These are all things that the Trump administration loves to point out as kind of their biggest success in this administration, which is interesting because really a lot of the actual success comes from the prior administration, comes from the Obama administration, where President Obama has this very sort of green legacy. But at the same time that they were, doing the Paris Climate Accord, they were also having a lot of conversations on the side about how to get natural gas to be, the bridge fuel, as was pointed out in the documentary. And the gentleman from India, a lot of energy is political. And that goes for climate change as well. So the Obama administration, I feel like, was trying to sort of have its cake and eat it too. And to this day, if you talk to folks, former Obama folks like Ernest Moniz, it's a pressure point for them because they don't want to be seen as folks that are possibly contributing to climate change. But when you sort of go a little bit deeper on why you think this is a good idea, what are the downsides, there's a lot of sort of tension and discomfort there. And so I think it's totally true that you really can't take the politics out of energy. And in this country, it's become a question of the economy or the climate. And that, I would say, as a reporter, as an environmental reporter, I think that's kind of false. That is kind of how things are seen.
Okay, Zach, so one of the details I loved from the film was you played these little snippets of the natural gas advertising jingles when they're like, oh, it's great for the environment. Why do you think it is that people, the media included, have focused so much on carbon dioxide as a contributor to greenhouse gases, and there's been so much less focus so far on methane? And do you hope your film is part of trying to shift that conversation?
Yeah, we had a lot of conversations about, what should our focus point be? Should it be just on the oil exports? Just focusing on that would have ignored this huge boom in natural gas exports and production that Jenny's talking about. And the thing is, talking about natural gas is trickier. And you could see us sort of grappling with that in conversations with Narendra Taneja, the spokesman for the ruling party in India, in that graphic where we laid out the theory of natural gas as a bridge fuel. And so ultimately we knew that would be a trickier subject to tackle, but one that, otherwise you're not going to have an honest conversation about American energy exports. And I don't know, you and Jenny might have better perspective on why that's on sort of in the legacy of recent environmental reporting, why carbon dioxide gets so much attention. I think it probably is because it's a little bit more straightforward, right? We noted that methane has, it's a smaller part of the overall footprint, but it is much more potent as long as it's in the atmosphere. And so details like that I think are important as well.
Did you want to add anything, Jenny?
Yeah, I think, like Zach said, CO2 gets a lot of the attention because that's what's been the primary issue for such a long time, dating back to the Industrial Revolution. And with methane, I think there's also the element of the industry. I think the industry has done a really, really good job of trying to downplay methane. I think they've also done a really good job of marketing natural gas. as a bridge fuel, as a clean energy fuel. They don't even
It
call
just
it a
sounds
pump.
nice.
Yeah,
Natural
it's just
gas.
like natural gas.
Yeah, it's all natural.
And it's like, oh, and it's, I've seen a lot of advertisements where it's like, it's clean, and then there's a little asterisk that should be on the bottom that says, but it's actually really not that much cleaner. And the science around it is still evolving, right? Like the study that Zach cited, that was 60% higher, methane was shown to be 60% higher than the EPA had estimated. That just came out, I believe, last year. And so the research is still sort of in this, it's still sort of coming out. And not only that, but with the current administration and the series of rollbacks that have been happening, just trying to get basic level data about how bad the methane issue is has been a tremendous effort that I believe, industry sort of said it was going to work on, and then it sort of has, but then it sort of hasn't, and it's kind of unfolding right now. So I think Zach's absolutely right. Methane is the more complicated story. But I should say it's not either oil or gas, it's both, right? When you drill, you get both. And if you want one, you get the other. And you can't, that sort of artificial separation, the laws that treat oil differently, the laws that treat gas differently, it's all politics. But when you actually drill into the ground, that's what you get is what you get. And so if you want gas, you're going to get oil too. And as you can see with all the cool graphs that were shown, we're selling both.
This is obviously a very ambitious production. Kate, can you talk a little bit about when you guys started working on this and maybe what the production process was like and some of the surprises along the way? I mean, did you find different answers to questions than you thought you would get? Was there a different component of the story you hadn't even envisioned at the beginning? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we started working on this about a year ago now, and I think what was most interesting about the production was finding ways to incorporate this great print reporting that was going on. So we kind of knew the directions we were going to go in the beginning, but it was also a matter of like Kia being available to go on that flight, or trying to figure out exactly how we wanted to incorporate Jenny, which we did try a couple of different things before we landed on her kind of historical explainer section. So I think that's really what's unique about this, is that incorporation of print reporting, and really everyone should check out those articles. They're online and very good.
This was a really, in case it's not already clear, this was a really unique production and partnership between 4 newsrooms, the Associated Press, Texas Tribune, Center for Public Integrity, and Newsy. And so there's this whole series of text reporting in addition to this documentary.
Yeah, and it gets into a lot that we couldn't show in the documentary. Like there is some stuff about worker safety hazards that are faced on oil and gas rigs. So, and that is stuff that we did do interviews for and didn't get into the documentary. So we're going to be releasing videos once we kind of figure out a wider distribution for the documentary.
And now to pitch it forward, so we've just obviously had the Democrats retake control of the House of Representatives in the U.S., but as this documentary mentions, the pipelines aren't being built to be used for 5 months and then abandoned. So what do you see as the future here? I mean, how much of this is going to go forward regardless of what happens in 2020, who's elected, and how much do you think might be changed? Do people care about it? And you have organizers like those folks in Colorado.
Yeah,
that's a question for all of you, I think.
I think Jenny's best equipped for this one.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah, there's a lot of attention right now with the Green New Deal, right? It's supposed to be a package, probably the only package I can remember that's trying to tackle climate change head on, but a lot of the details of it are a little, it's Capitol Hill, it's gray, right? And I think what's really interesting is the way the oil and gas industry works is, once you kind of unleash it, it's been unleashed, right? Like with the oil export ban being overturned, like that's it. Unless you go back in and make another act of Congress putting it back in place, which is highly unlikely. I would argue that the way the industry works is very profit-driven, it's very market-driven, and that's self-sustaining in its own way. And so if you're going to tell an oil and gas company, we're going to make it much harder for you to drill oil and gas, sort of like with the setback rules as you saw in Colorado and in Texas, they're going to mount a very, very strong defense because it's a direct obstacle to them doing business. So the idea of let's do this carbon neutral, zero emissions future, and then simultaneously you've got the private oil and gas industry, which is really being boosted by both the Obama and the Trump administration. There's a really reasonable, logical question of what is it that Congress can actually do to sort of stop this ball that's already in motion. And I think also it's the typical question in Washington, which is what if? And then I don't know, I don't think any reporter has answers. It's just kind of like, well, we'll just wait and have to see what happens.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the audience in a second, but yeah, is there anything that you wanted to bring up?
No, I saw Jacob. Do we have time for Q&A, or do we need to?
Yeah, I think
we're capped.
We're out, okay.
I will
Sorry,
say that.
Might discuss after.
Well, at least myself, and I'll speak for Kate too. Are you okay to stick around for Q&A afterward? Well, informal Q&A afterward and outside. I promise to answer any question that folks have. And thank you for coming. Thank you so much.